Produced on the traditional territory of the Tewa people, the Santa Fe Art Institute welcomes you back to the Tilt Podcast. I'm Kourtney Andar, and in today's episode, I explore the liminality of edges and perimeters, the physical reality and poetical possibilities of the Midtown Site, where the Santa Fe Art Institute is located. How does containment, such as walls, fences, dry acequias, and roads, create different barriers or opportunities? Join me on a walk as I speak with SFAI alumni Hakeem Bellamy and Ehren Natay. The Santa Fe Art Institute is pleased to present to you Episode 12, Walking Midtown. I'm Kourtney Andar, the Works Manager at the Santa Fe Art Institute. I am really pleased to be here with one of our favorite collaborators over the years, Ehren Natay.
Well, hi Courtney. Thanks for having me on the show, on the Tilt Podcast. I'm excited to be here, and it's always good to be back on the Santa Fe Art Institute campus. Fond memories of being here and doing my fellowship. This is where I reside. I live about 7 minutes away from here, and I was born and raised in this house on Camino del Bosque. And Santa Fe Art Institute was something that I became aware of, I believe, when I was in 8th grade. And I, all these years later, had the fellowship. So there's been a little bit of a connection that's streaming along here. My type of work that I do is mixed media. I've been playing percussion for about 26 years now, and I'm a visual artist as well. I work with watercolors, photography. I've done sculpture in small scales with jewelry, and now that I have sort of come to a level of understanding in all these different medias, my intuition says to bring it all together in film. You could put together all the moving images of photography with the music, sound production, and add in all of these artistic elements and know-how in one medium, in one way of storytelling. So that's what I've been up to lately, and it's good to be here on campus and to talk about this place. It's a place that I call home.
So we're actually right here outside. I'm sure the listeners can hear cars driving by. You can probably hear the wind and the birds. We're right outside of the Santa Fe Art Institute building on the Midtown Site here in Santa Fe. Over the last few episodes, we've been talking about the Midtown Site. We've been talking about, we've been reminiscing about the past. All of us kind of have different relationships with what this site used to be. It was two different colleges. For over 50 years, it was the College of Santa Fe, and for 10 years, it was the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. Both of those entities have closed now. And so the Tilt Podcast has been exploring what the future of the Midtown Site is going to be. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the barriers. So this really is a conversation about access. Right now, we're walking right outside of the SFAI building on the site. We're just kind of crossing over the little roundabout here, some of you may be familiar with. And we've been discussing the barriers as kind of a metaphor for what the future of the campus is going to be. So our listeners are familiar with the fact that this campus, this site, is surrounded by fences and walls on most sides of it. Most sides of the campus has these very large, kind of reddish brown colored walls, and they kind of have a staggered height as you move through the campus. And of course, one of the things that we've seen pretty often is folks who are moving about the campus, hopping the walls, jumping over the fences, trying to take shortcuts. The campus is really interesting because there are two openings. Of course, there's an entrance at St. Michael's Drive, there's an entrance at Siringo Road, but everywhere else essentially is covered by some kind of fence or wall. And right now we're walking past the red colored reddish brown colored, I don't know if this is brick. It looks like a brick or some kind of cement or stone.
Yeah.
And it's got staggered heights. And folks have a hard time getting to the other side of these walls, for instance, wanting to access the College Plaza shopping center that's on the other side of these walls. And so what we see people doing pretty often is literally just jumping over the wall.
Yeah.
Instead of walking all the way down to St. Michael's and then making the big loop around, which is what you have to do, what we see is folks consistently hopping over the wall and taking the quickest route to the shopping center.
Yeah.
So one of the things we want to talk with you about, Ehren, is what is your relationship on this campus, on the Midtown site, with the barriers and the walls and the separations, you know?
Okay.
And what is it like for you to like be back here and, you know, kind of see how people are accessing these spaces? Like right now we're walking up to a shopping cart that is surrounded by trash. This shopping cart is often used as a boost up. It's sitting on its side right here next to the wall, and what people do is they step up on it so they can hop over the wall. And you can, and on the other side there are two more shopping carts.
Real easy, convenient,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
little bridge over.
Yeah, and you can see that they're taking a shortcut over this wall and taking carts right into the College Plaza shopping area right here. So what is your experience with the bears? Have you ever hopped these walls while you've been on campus? Have you ever did it? I've never done it before. I
Yeah.
probably could, but I haven't done it yet.
You know, to be honest with you, it's kind of funny. This is like a confession right now.
Yeah?
But when I was a young adolescent, we would come out here looking for trouble, you know, behind the buildings. There was people throwing away cool stuff. They would come through with their sometimes stuff that they were getting rid of. They just didn't want to take it to the dump or take it to the thrift store or something, so they would just unload stuff near the dumpsters behind these buildings. There was also Hastings, I believe, right? Hastings was here, and they threw away so much magazines. All they would do is rip off the front and put it into this bin and lock up the bin. So you had all these, you know, 1-month-old magazines that people just didn't purchase. They would throw them out. So it was like free stuff. But one time, I remember when we came back here, you know, this was when we were kids or whatever, we were playing with matches. And we set a couch on fire back here. And we hopped the fence into here. And we were kind of freaked out about, you know, oh, what do we do? Like, we took off running, and we were just kind of watching the smoke. You know, someone had threw this old nasty couch away. So we set it on fire. And then we came back to this side of the campus, and you know, the fire truck was here, and they were putting it out and everything. So I mean, we're troublemakers, like, and this was our playground back in the day. And so it's funny, I didn't really think about that until I came over here and looked at this area and remembered that moment. But you know, it's kind of I think of it as a playground area, and it's a place where people are crossing through, like you said. It's right smack dab in the middle of two very busy areas in Santa Fe.
Here comes the truck. Yeah, that's one of the aspects that makes this so interesting, is that it's like a crossroads between two different parts of Santa Fe.
Yeah.
You know, and we see people coming through, and it's pretty obvious there's transient persons moving through the campus, and what they want to do is take a very quick shortcut right to the other side, because they're either continuing on maybe to the rail runner station that's not too far from here, or perhaps they're trying to access the walking trails, which may give them quicker access to somewhere where they could get help, where they could sleep, where they could get some supplies, things like that. Because it's so empty, there is this feeling of like, should I be on the campus?
Right.
Can I be on the, what can I do on the campus? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and just walking here. So this architecture also is unique because it's providing a nice bit of cover. You know, for, I think on their level, like of a transient person, this is probably a warm area. It's nice and dark. Like people aren't going to be watching out and seeing what you're doing. Same as, you know, we were back then looking for like little places to cover and make mischief. Like these people are trying to avoid, you know, getting stopped. And they're trying to make it the shortest route possible, like you said. So it, to me, almost seems like it could almost be a safer place without this cover of the wall. I never really thought about it until, you know, we brought up, you brought this up in the conversation.
That's really interesting. It's funny because the fact that these barriers are here means that, you know, by default there's some kind of rule that says you shouldn't cross them. That's why they put it up, right? There's private commercial property on the other side here, College Plaza Shopping Center. These barriers are here to very forcefully say you're likely not supposed to cross these barriers. The funny thing is, pretty often when I drive in and out, because I, you know, come into work at SFAI, driving in and out of campus, I see people hopping the wall, and I see security doesn't even say anything to them. They just let them do it.
It's that part of the culture now.
Wow.
Well, you know, I guess I'm the type of person that thinks of solutions, and I'm like, you know, what if this was a path? What if this was, instead of a wall, what if it was a path for traveling on? Like the Chamisa Trail right there. Maybe it connects to the Chamisa Trail, because that was another thing that was cool about this campus is riding bikes. It made it so much easier to get to the main roads without having to go up steep hills and, you know, be in traffic. Like this was a safer place to come through too for us kids riding bikes. So, you know, I think of the Chamisa Trail, and it also is being used for the transients. You know, I live right on the Chamisa Trail, and I actually live in an alleyway, and people use that alleyway to get to Rodeo Road. And so you know, it's really sad because a lot of these people are suffering from addiction. And there's been so many needles that I find on my morning walks. And even I found an entire sharps container that was dumped in the alleyway, just probably 50 to 100 needles in the alleyway. So it's you know, these people do need solutions. Maybe they just needed a place to dump these sharps, and they became overwhelmed on their cart and they dropped in the alleyway. And maybe this campus needs different ways of thinking about including those type of people, that we have to live with them too, you know. So my mind sees a road here. A road could, you know, people can walk their animals, they can ride their bikes. It would be something that's welcoming. We could light up the area. Maybe that would make it more safe.
Absolutely. I totally agree. It's a really interesting kind of conundrum because the campus is, you know, like I said, most of the buildings are closed, they're all locked up. There's plywood on some of the windows. You know, there's very little activity other than the occasional film crew and folks here getting PCR testing for COVID. But other than that, there's not a lot going on. You know, the last time we had a big event was the Midtown Block Party that our collaboration put on this past fall. You know, one of the things I'm thinking is the campus was home to the College of Santa Fe for over 50 years. It then became the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. These were two relatively large entities. You know, they were both private, and it's just really amazing how quickly these entities can just leave the site. You know, I mean, when you look in some of these windows, which I've done quite a bit, and I've actually toured these buildings too, it looks almost like the professors and the instructors and the students just stood up and walked out. And they just like left all the things. I mean, it's so eerie. There's like coffee mugs and there's like notepads with like notes scribbled on them still sitting on the desk. It's like everyone just stood up at the same time and just left. And you know, and the rooms were all left like in situ, right? Just in that state that they were when this closed down. And that's not exactly what happened, of course, but it did seem like the college closed really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had friends that were in the arts program, you know, trying to get their bachelor's, and they invested their entire lives, came here from Chicago to be a student here and get their degree, and they were pissed. They were so pissed. They invested their entire life savings into being here and doing this art thing and learning, and they come here and, you know, it was kind of a joke to them. And then all of a sudden, it's just like you said, people caught wind that it was going to close down, and then they made the announcement, and all these students were like, well, what am I going to do? This was my 4-year, 8-year plan. So it is kind of like a ghost town. I mean, people had dreams and goals that they just left in place. And I have friends that are, you know, they're not even doing art right now. They're just kind of working jobs, being in restaurants and stuff like that. Not even doing their artwork that they set out to do. It crushed people, you know? So these people, these corporations, they have no accountability to these students after they closed up shop on them.
Yeah, we still get calls from former students asking for transcripts, asking how they can contact former instructors. I mean, probably twice a month someone calls and says, I'm looking for my transcripts, so can you tell me who to talk to? I've been trying to call the city, I've been trying to call Laureate, you know, which doesn't even they don't even have any headquarters here in New Mexico. They're an international education company, so they have no connection with us anymore. It's just amazing. Folks are like trying to get their transcripts so they can go to school somewhere else, you know, because they were kicked off this campus. So yeah, it's wild. And then of course now what you've got is essentially a closed campus, or at least a patrolled campus, where now you feel like we don't know who is or is not allowed to be on site. Yeah,
it's kind of has this exclusive feel to it. And, you know, you were talking about the different people that are here, and it's like police training, which already kind of has an exclusive or an exclusionary feel to it. Then you've got the movie industry people, you know, they've got a lot of cool stuff going on, but it's film industry. They're trying to keep things under wraps. They don't want anything leaked. You know, you even have to sign an NDA when you work over there, so their jobs depend on being private. So for them, it's nice that they have this little private area. You know, then we got Santa Fe Art Institute here, which really is bringing people from all over and exposing them to this area of campus. And when people come here from Greece, they're like, what is this place? Like, there's army barracks over there? Like, what? Tell me about that. And then there's the brothers, the
Christian Brothers?
The Christian Brothers right next door. And the tennis complex, from what I hear, is still up and going.
Yeah, the Schellenberger Tennis Center.
Schellenberger, which, you know, I had my brothers next door. They grew up doing tennis tournaments next door.
Interesting.
So, and then what's after that? The HEC.
There's the what is it? The higher education complex?
Higher education.
One of the things I'm thinking about is, and I guess we can move out the sun so we don't melt over here, but I'm thinking of what it will take to really make this site come alive again. I remember when I first started working at SFAI, I started in January of 2017. The Santa Fe University of Art and Design was booming, at least it seemed so to me. There probably had already been discussion at that time of closing it eventually. I assume that's the case, but it didn't look that way to me.
Right.
It looked like a bustling campus. There were thousands of students on campus every day. There were instructors. They had events. You know, our listeners are familiar with the band shell that's in the middle of the campus site, where there were large events. I saw music, I saw film screenings.
Yeah.
You know, folks just outside playing volleyball. You know, kicking a ball around. The cafeteria was open. I would get lunch at the cafeteria 2 or 3 times a week during that time. And so the campus really did feel totally alive. I mean, it felt electric. There was a buzz. There was things going on. The academic buildings had posters for local events and study abroad. You know, come to this lecture. You know, come to this, you know, film screening. All those things.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder what it'll take to make this site really a community gathering place again. Like, how, you know, what is it that we can do on this campus to make this really a meeting ground for community, you know, maybe activism, maybe, you know, just bringing Santa Fe together and, you know, coming together as a community to solve the kind of myriad issues that the city's dealing with right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder the same thing, and, you know, you're right. When it was a university and there were people here, it also felt lived in and safe for that reason. You know, I think safety comes to mind a lot for people because there's crazy things that go down here, like, and that's a part of our culture and our society here that we can't really ignore anymore. We have to figure out ways to help it. So I really would like to see healing happen here. I don't know how that can be, but you know, I'm a member of the Santa Fe Indigenous Center's board, and the city inquired what we thought about this space and what we would like to see happen. And we all unanimously decided that we wanted to see dance grounds here.
Oh, yeah.
And we wanted a place where people come together, like you're talking about. And it's this beautiful idea of a place to celebrate, have song, dance, music, people gathering. And, you know, and then as I'm on the board, we have to have actual conversations about, well, okay, what does this mean? How do we actually have the dance grounds?
Right.
Does that mean we have to take care of it and cut the grass, and we have to, if somebody wants to rent it out for an event, do we help them out? Is it sacred? How do we share this space with everybody? Because it's a unique way to tribute this area, you know, to the land, to just have open dance space of community use, communal use. So there's so many questions that we can't really even see until we start to sit down and say, all right, what does this mean by putting a dance grounds here, or a, you know, Los Alamos National Labs office building here, or whatever it's gonna end up being. You know, how can we make it safe? How can we make it forward to the future? How can we make it so that it's a place where the community can find healing? You know, can find easy things to access. Like, if there's all these people crossing through here on foot, maybe it's a great place to have a center where people can sell their artwork or their goods, farmers market on this side of town. I don't know. But like you're saying, it's possible. It was possible because of education and all these students wanting and having a reason to be here.
Right.
What that next reason is, I don't know. But we at the Indigenous Center see the arts being still a centerpiece of that conversation. And you have such amazing arts facilities here already. The theater, the collection, and the library. We can't just let those, you know, be demolished.
Absolutely.
You know, how do we preserve that and invite the community in to participate in those things?
I was just in one of the Visual Arts Center buildings. They have a really lovely small library, but it's a 2-level library. When you go into the room, you can also take a flight of stairs up and look over at the balcony at the rest of the library. And I was just kind of sifting through various things. There was a city worker who was allowing us to tour the space, and I was opening up drawers, and suddenly I saw all of these old, I want to say it's probably Mexican art, almost like a Mexican art pamphlet, but very large pieces of paper that were that kind of like accordion out when you open it up, and all of these really old style wall paintings. And I was just like, oh man, I've never seen anything like this. And it's literally just sitting in a building that is locked and inaccessible to the rest of the community, you know, hidden in a drawer that you could never get to until someone figures out how to open all these buildings again. So I'm thinking like hearing you talk and my experience going through the buildings, I keep thinking there's a difference in perspectives if the idea of, you know, on the campus is let's make sure we bring in business and protect the asset and maybe get a return on investment and like make money for the city. Okay, so how do we do that? Yeah, you know, film crews, they, you know, do films here, you know, PCR, COVID testing, things, you know, renting the spaces out. But this other perspective of this can be a meeting ground for community that is not necessarily geared towards profit and business, you know, or making money for the city of Santa Fe, but it can be bringing value to this, you know, to the community, and how this place can be that kind of meeting ground, like you said, and it actually would be really meaningful to the people in the community, rather than like, let's make as much money as we can on the campus and on the site. So what do you think is a way for the community to kind of get that message out, maybe communicate that to the city, communicate that to the rest of our community members, and say, this could really be a vibrant space. We don't have to let it just turn into some stale, you know, business park, I guess, like every other city has. But how does the community really reach out and make that known that this is something that we want here?
I think, well, it's hard to say, but I feel that there's got to be ways to engage community into the conversation, to really have the community have their hands in it, and for the community to come up here, not a corporation, not to bring Starbucks into here, but to have somebody from New Mexico, from Santa Fe, come up here and like to heal that our economy, to heal our local economy, to heal someone from the streets, you know, to take them up out of the streets and bring them into their own, standing on their feet and everything. How do we do that? We gotta hear ideas from the community, from those people specifically. And you know, I'm working on a project that hopefully will help that, and it's by involving youth into the conversation, because they have such a unique and fresh perspective on things, and they think about things in such a humanitarian way, you know, thinking out of compassion so much, that they have these forward-thinking ideas that we can really feed into and nourish like seeds. So the way that I've been exploring bringing the youth into the conversation is through Minecraft, the video game. And I have a friend of mine that I'm working with. He's actually currently building the arts building. Dylan Tenorio?
Yeah, that's right. He's been on the show,
Okay, so he's actually building a model of this so that we can bring students in and have a conversation about, what do you see here? What kind of a buildings? What does it look like? What's the purpose? How do we get people here, you know? They might have ideas that we're not even keen to, because we're just thinking about money and thinking about the bills being paid or whatever it is. So I think we need to start there with maybe the artists that had a relationship with this campus. They can think of ways to bring our community in and talk about nourishing this place, having it be their place of healing. What would be healing for them? Not a survey, you know, not a piece of paper,
Right.
but connection. You know, working with communities, working with the schools, working with homeless community that's living here, right? I don't know exactly what the solutions are, but I think the answers are there in the community members themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that you've brought to mind, as we've kind of taken a big loop around the campus and we've ended outside here at SFAI. And what I'm thinking at this point is, you know, bringing people onto the campus and actually getting them here runs counter to kind of the existence of these barriers and these fences and these walls, right? I mean, very clearly what you see when you come on the site, on the campus, is walls that are separating various entities, you know. But what we've been discussing as we've kind of walked around these different locations on the site is bringing people on the campus, actually really occupying this space so that the community and the city and maybe, you know, maybe the state of New Mexico sees what we use it for and sees why it matters. Of course, it's existential for SFAI because we want the campus to be alive. We don't want it to be dead. That's better for us, you know, in terms of our safety and our security here and the fact that we can reach out to the community here on this campus. But I wonder what will happen to these barriers, these fences, these walls, the security patrols, as we open up the campus and as we make it accessible for people to really enjoy and not feel like they're trespassing, right?
Yeah.
Not feel like they're being surveilled or like they're doing something wrong.
Right,
You know?
right.
Yeah. Ehren, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Courtney.
you for taking the time out today. Beautiful day.
Yes, we're blessed.
Really open sky and sunny. Very blessed, 100%. I totally agree. We really appreciate you. Writer, poet, storyteller, Story Maps fellow, alumni, Ehren Natay. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Courtney. It's great to be here again.
Just really happy to be joined by Hakeem Bellamy, one of our favorite friends here at the Santa Fe Art Institute.
Sure, thanks for having me, Courtney. Yeah, of course, shout out to my SFAI fam. I'm a alum of the food justice residency. Many years back, my son was much smaller than he stayed with me. That was they extended me the family residency program, so I was able to have my son, who I don't know, 7 or 8 at the time. He's 14 now, so it was a while ago. But it is good to be back and to be engaged in the larger Santa Fe community. For the past, let me start over. Hakeem Bellamy, and in the past, when I first arrived in New Mexico 16 years ago now, I came from the Philadelphia area. Just outside of Philadelphia is a small town called Sicklerville, New Jersey, which is still where my mother and my brothers live. One of them lives in Berlin, the other one lives in Sicklerville. But that's where I grew up. I went to high school in South Jersey. Didn't move out here till I was about 26, and started at the UNM School of Communications. And at the time, I began my master's in 2005 when I first moved here, and kind of got to be a full-time grad student for like one semester before the poetry slam community, which I started engaging with. It really took off. I arrived here on the joke is, as an African American man, is that I arrived here on MLK Day. That can't be lost on the folklore of my arrival here. I landed on MLK Day, and then 2 months later, I was part of the UNM Lobo Slam team, which would then go on to win 2 college national championship titles. By April, I was the city slam champ in Albuquerque. And then by August, we were the national poetry slam champs. And so that first year was fast. And then I had to go to school part-time because I was on the road a lot and started touring and doing lots of other things. But yeah, always, kind of circling back to what is now home now for 16 years. You know, my son was born at UNMH, so he's I always say I'm a native Borqueño by birth, just not my birth, but his birth. And my wife is actually from many places, but has family ties up in northern New Mexico. So we here, we ain't going nowhere, like, you know. And so and I was fortunate in 2012 to be named the first poet laureate for the city of Albuquerque. And that really, I feel like that sealed the deal. It consummated my marriage with this place. You know, when you're invited to be the laureate and kind of present poetry on behalf of a place and of a people and of a history, it's a huge responsibility and opportunity. And I just feel like that's where we bonded our DNA, my DNA in the dirt here in the desert. So that's that. And now, you know, fast forward, I just finished working at the city of Albuquerque. I worked for Mayor Tim Keller for his first term for the first 4 years as a deputy director for the Department of Arts and Culture. And ironically, that's kind of full circle, because when I became poet laureate, I would report to the public art program in our city. That's where they housed the laureate program. In what used to be called cultural services, now the Department of Arts and Culture. So I used to get a check from the department, and then I fast forward to being the deputy director of the department, and now you know, back in the community, private sector, as I like to say, just trying to make cool things happen in the world around me. So that's some of that is this podcast and the work with SFAI, being able to have the time. Now I don't have a 40-hour week, 9 to 5. Being able to have the time to engage with community partners, Little Globe, to do the things that are important to me, like telling and capturing stories, which is, you know, that boiling it down, that's really what poets do, right? They tell stories and they try to capture stories and share them. So
maybe along the lines of that, maybe give us an idea of your experience here. When I first got here, so many of the conversations were about land and culture and history, and like whose history is being recognized and whose history is being well, either not acknowledged, not recognized, or even erased in some ways. And of course, Black history in New Mexico is still one of those things that has a long way to go in our educational system. There's changes that are happening there, and there's other kind of movements that are happening. But give us a sense of how you experienced that when you first got here. What was the conversation like for you in terms of how people talked about New Mexico's history and the land and the culture that was here, and maybe how you felt yourself fitting into that?
Yeah, you know, when I first arrived, it saddens me to note that one of my big mentors early on when I arrived here, Kalanji Mwanza, he just passed away a few months ago. And he was the first director of the Office of African American Affairs, which is I eventually worked for the state during the Richardson administration for the Office of African American Affairs shortly after my son was born. And Kalanji was one of the first people I was, you know, my boss at the time, Dr. Harold Bailey, was like, hey, you need to, you know, you're not from here, you're a transplant, I'm gonna send you on the road, you're gonna go to different parts of the state to meet the various Black communities around the state, and some of the folks here who are like, you know, pillars in the community that have a lot of the history, so you can really understand. Because yeah, coming here as a Black man with a African American experience from Philadelphia and the East Coast does not mean you know what's happening, right? Doesn't mean you know what's happening in the Black community here. It's amazing, but even though popular media would not have you believe it, we are not a monolith. We are not a monolithic voting block, and we are not a monolith of experiences and histories. And so I went about a learning tour, and Kalanji was one of the first people I met, and he was one of the first people that said, like, you know, we have to do something about this tricultural myth. His background was social work, and so he was definitely involved with the health and well-being of children. That he concerned himself with that till the day he died, especially our Black children in the state. And he was like, you know, that is one of the most insidious kind of pieces of erasure. Use the word erasure, or like really like it does more harm than we know. Being a child growing up here and feeling like you're a guest, instead of feeling like you have, you know, you have a right, you know, to this place. You have a legacy in this place. You are an inheritee of this place. And if you always feel distant or not connected to it, or you feel like it's not yours, then that directly speaks to how you go about caring or not caring for it as you get older and as you move on. And so he was really, that was kind of his gospel, that was his sermon. And so I kind of adopted that and learned to understand it, especially as I kind of grew in my career as a poet, and I was in classrooms a lot, K through graduate school, and kind of just seeing like, wow, like we really aren't present in the stories or the textbooks and the way things are, the way New Mexico history is taught. And even all the way up into how New Mexico is now represented to other parts of the world, when you think about tourism and how we kind of tell our story to the world. Why would you go somewhere, even though we're transplants, but maybe that made it mysterious and interesting, but why would you go somewhere that doesn't feel like they're not targeting, I guess that's not the right word, but they're not pitching to you. They're not it's like, they're not saying that this is a place where you will be welcome. This is a place where you belong. And so I just feel like as I kind of advanced and then I became a father, I sought to make sure my son felt like he had a place here.
Maybe one of the questions I have for you is, what has been your experience on the Midtown site? Are you comfortable here when you're here on the site, when you're walking around, when you're entering and exiting the site on foot or driving? What is your experience here? Do you have, are you able to do your work here? Do you have a positive experience in terms of the work you've done here? And have you had other negative experiences while you've been on the Midtown site?
Yeah, I having been there as a resident and then kind of coming up occasionally for events over the years when it was College of Santa Fe, Val Martinez, who was the second, I believe, poet laureate of Santa Fe, still a good friend of mine. When she was teaching at College of Santa Fe, we used to come up there for a few Poetry Palooza National Poetry Month events. It's April. So it was around this time many years ago, I would find myself up there in the big performance hall. I feel like I saw a few years back, I was there to see, I think it was Site Santa Fe had brought, I think it was the Russian group Pussy Riot came. So I've been there for a few things over the years. And then my time there as a resident, and then I'm a runner. So I would go jogging when I was there as a resident, and I kind of run the perimeter of the campus. When it was, SFUAD, I was on the other side of the campus that's kind of closer to Santa Fe High. And so I'm kind of like just in different iterations of myself and on different parts of the campus over the years. I feel like I even performed over there a number of times. And so I think that it obviously depends on the context with which you were there. When I was there as a resident and I would be going in and out probably late at night sometimes, maybe just me and my son, it was always super quiet. And it was kind of after it was an active college campus, but SFAI was always active and populated, and a little quieter on the weekends than maybe during the week. My experience has generally been being there has been on weekends or weeknights, not necessarily during the bustling business day. And then in recent years, I've been around and kind of seeing a lot of this is off limits to you because it's a film set, which is interesting because that's, and we have film sets all over New Mexico, right? But it kind of feels like because many people know there's a sound stage and things like that, you're just like, oh, I don't want to get in the way, which is a feeling that's not kind of like necessarily an unwelcoming feeling, but it's a feeling like, this space is supposed to be my space, but all parts of it are not accessible to me, right? And I just feel like how do we encourage and keep entertaining film industry folks to utilize all parts of the city, not just the mid-campus site, but the Midtown site, excuse me, but to be able to say what that bigger question, like what about these spaces that are quasi-public, meaning supposedly you are always welcome to have access, except for in these, 5, 10, 500 situations right here. And I just feel like the uncertainty of that is what makes folks, well-meaning folks, well-mannered folks just go, well, I don't want to go over there because it's too, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be over there. So it's better to just not be there at all. And so it kind of leads to bigger questions of ownership. And I'm a big fan of public spaces in the commons and what is actually the commons and what is not. And I just feel like that's a question we collectively, I say we, Santa Fe, I'm an adopted child up there, but that just needs to be figured out because if you're not it's almost like if you're not, and I tried to say this earlier, I didn't have the right words, but if you're not being specifically pitched to or advertised to or invited, then you kind of assume like, like yes is yes and everything else is no. So you just kind of feel like, well, I guess it's not for me. I guess it's not mine. And then that leads to the bigger conversations of what could it be? Like if it's easy to say, well, people have no interest in this space when they didn't feel like they were invited to the space before. So we have no idea. We can't even imagine what it would look like as a space where there was, bustling activity, a town square, a center for commerce and conversation, a restaurant, right? A shady space where like ideas are shared and people, cohabit, live, work, and play. And I just feel like it's an amazing opportunity, I think, in front of Santa Fe to do right now with that space, as big as it is, expansive as it is, in the heart of the city. What would it look like to have the same kind of fabric that maybe the plaza has on the other end of the city, right? But kind of there in Midtown, what would that look like, And I'm also conscious, I guess, as a person who was an educator in Santa Fe for a while, affiliated with Mexico School for the Arts, both as an educator and as a board member, but saying, and what does that really mean to our young people? I mean, there's a lot of talk now about Paulo Soleri just up the road coming back. And I remember, having lived here almost 20 years when that went away, and there was kind of a generational change, and obviously the property dynamics and the property cost and value and tax dynamic is not lost on people of Santa Fe. It became increasingly more expensive to live there just during the time I was here. And what does that say to, young emerging families and folks who are just entering the workforce with only a limited amount of income? Is it saying, if it's not saying it explicitly, it's implicitly saying you should live somewhere else? And I feel like that's been a little bit of the posture of Santa Fe towards people, 45 and under for a long time. And so it's an opportunity now to not, if that's not who we want to be, this is an opportunity to be something different.
That's such a good point, Hakeem. One of the things I've been, mulling around in my head along those lines is this affordability crisis that is happening in Santa Fe right now. Is a really interesting moment to reflect on what a space could be when you have an opportunity to create something new. The stories that we've been hearing over the course of the last few episodes of the Tilt podcast are people who are remembering how they used to be on the Midtown site when it was a campus, when it was a school, when it was a gathering place, just like being able to go to the cafeteria and fill up a huge carton of food, and then go outside and they had volleyball nets up and you could play with your friends, and they had events and concerts in the band shell right there next to the mural as well. And there were so many different spaces on campus that were activated that you could access, and it didn't feel like it was off limits, and you mentioned earlier this idea of representation and actually seeing yourself represented as a way of feeling welcome in a space and welcome to a place, and if that representation, if literally not seeing those spaces or not hearing those voices or those stories is not there, then there is this kind of implicit assumption, I think, it's well, is that a place where I want to go? And we've heard, of course, on the Midtown site, there's a security detail, they do patrol, they kind of drive around and they make sure that people aren't trying to access the closed buildings. And, they generally don't like people hopping over the walls and things like that. They try to keep behavior to a kind of reasonable kind of level so they can surveil,
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't, the campus didn't used to be that way, right? It didn't
Sure.
used to be a place that was kind of heavily patrolled and surveilled. And as Black people, we have a particular relationship with that, and a relationship with walls and barriers, a relationship
Absolutely.
with pathways and where we can go and where we can't go. And hopping over a wall is, as a Black man, just, growing up
Right.
in the Midwest. I grew up in Chicago and Springfield, Illinois, and, lived in the South for a time as well. And literally just the sight of a Black man hopping over a wall or like jumping
Right.
over a fence is iffy. You know, it's like,
Immediately like, this is not what it looks like. Like I'm
yeah.
supposed to be here. And then, you know, and then, like I said, when I was there, mainly in my residency, you know, I guess it was less threatening because I had a small child with me. And if you're there enough, they notice, you know, I would be lying, super disingenuous if it wasn't like, you know, the first 2 times me and the security guard made eye contact and he realized I was supposed to be there. He's not going to forget who I am just because of, like you and I just said, because there's not a lot of Black people. And so he's going to be like, oh, that guy's here for something. After a while, it's cool. But that first interaction, it can go either way still, right? Like, you know, and it's like, yeah, you know, I was never at a point where they were like, you know, show me your papers. But it was always like, I'm sure there were some other calls made, but like, is there supposed to be a guy walking around? Yeah, he's supposed to be here. He's a resident. Okay, just checking. Like, yeah, I imagine those kind of things happen when you have, you know, a radio, like, you know. And you're right, and that just comes from, you know, our normal, you know, especially as we walk in the world as Black men, our normal kind of self-preservation strategies, like, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. But before we close out the show, we're going to feature a wonderful spoken word piece by Hakeem Bellamy. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about the piece, just very quickly, the title of it, and kind of your, you know, your process for writing it and what you were thinking about and kind of what you wanted to convey in the piece?
Yeah, no. Shout out to Little Globe. That Hank, who you know is our like genius producer of the episode, holding the big vision of the episode. Thanks for them for inviting me in. And then Ed Radke, who actually shot it. When I was first invited to be on board, they were like, I kind of got a download of what the episode was going to be talking about. And then Hank Robertson sent me a bunch of images of the barracks, the inside and the outside. I had asked for some kind of archival footage of the barracks, like aerial views and how it was plotted out. And it's just super interesting, right? Anybody who's been there knows that, like, wow, I had no idea that this place was a hospital and a school and kind of all these things that, you know, even today, we still hold those kind of locations as these kind of places that are in the commons, places that we all share and have use of. And that's where the kind of heart, it's called National Geographic is the name of the poem. And it gets there, it gets to like preserve and safari, which you can, that kind of connects to the title, but it kind of starts at like the heart of the city. And what does that mean? And very directly, like no super elaborate metaphor there, is that it was a hospital. So heart of the city, right? Like, you know, and then what does that mean as the energy and the history from that space begins to permeate out into the rest of the body of Santa Fe, like through the arteries, through the roadways, like and all those things. And so it's kind of got two lanes, like circulatory system, and then also this idea of what happens when we try to preserve things. Sometimes when we try to preserve something, we put walls and fences around it and we try to trap it in time. And sometimes that's a disservice, right? As opposed to kind of letting it be amorphous, letting it be without boundaries, let it kind of change and evolve and grow. And the poem is not an indictment on either way. Like, I just left the job where we, you know, the city of Albuquerque, my department manages the biopark. There's a lot of interesting views on zoos, on the place of zoos in society. Like, should we just not have them? But when you think about it, it's like, yeah, well, we also like help preserve species there. We help repatriate species there. So it's like there's a trade-off no matter which way you choose. And so I try to talk about that with no judgment, that idea of not having judgment and just saying, but be sober about the consequences of each. And that's kind of where the poem goes.
Hakeem Bellamy, thank you so much for joining the Tilt podcast. We're really, really appreciative. We're so grateful that you joined us for the collaboration with Little Globe. It's been awesome. I hope the listeners enjoyed the spoken word piece. We're going to put it on just shortly here, National Geographic. But thank you, Hakeem. You're one of our favorite friends at the Santa Fe Art Institute, one of our favorite alums of the residency program, and just an all-around really wonderful community leader, organizer, poet, activist, just wonderful guy. I'm looking forward to spending more time with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for doing this, Courtney. Good time this morning, brother.
Absolutely.
Hakeem Bellamy. This place will always be the heart of the city. We'll always occupy sacred vacancy in our minds and chests. We'll always be beating in the background. We'll always be breathing in the foreground. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, but still. This place has always been more hospital than hospice, has always been sanctuary surrounded by war. This place has been a symbol all along. Now just a curio of cares we did and didn't give, of kites we did and did not fly, of lives we could and could not save. Meanwhile, we now fancy this place a preserve. Some cities are indeed jungles, but not this one. This one is a safari. And like any safari, if you run far enough in any one direction, you will run into a horizon.
Thank you so much to all of our listeners and supporters out there, and a very special thank you to today's guests, Ehren Natay and Hakeem Bellamy. Another very special thank you to our wonderful collaborators, Little Globe Incorporated. Episode 12 is a collaboration with Little Globe. It is funded in part by the City of Santa Fe Arts and Culture Department. Be sure to visit our website, sfai.org, for more information.